All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into something, well, it's a little out there, but absolutely fascinating. We're talking about a case study that pulls together neuroscience, microbiology, and ancient plant medicines. And it all boils down to one wild question. What if the real healing power of psychedelics isn't just in your head, but deep in your gut? When we talk about mental health, we're almost always looking at the brain, right? But this research, it kind of flips that idea on its head. It asks something really provocative. Could the secret to how these powerful compounds heal us actually be hiding in the trillions of tiny organisms living inside our intestines? It sounds pretty wild, but stick with me. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First up, why are we even talking about psychedelics and your gut? Then we'll get into the science of that gut-brain connection. We'll follow one patient's incredible story, decode the results, and then, try to connect all the dots. Let's get into it. All right, first things first. Psychedelics and gut bacteria? Yeah, I know. It sounds like two completely different worlds. So why on earth are researchers even starting to connect them? Well, it really comes down to this massive global problem: depression. I mean, just look at that number. 280 million people. That's a staggering amount of human suffering. And the truth is, for a lot of folks, the treatments we have now just aren't cutting it. So scientists are having to get creative. They're looking in places they never would have before, and that's what led them to the incredibly complex world of our gut. Okay, so for any of this to make sense, we need to talk about a really crucial piece of our own biology. Think of it like a superhighway running right through you. It's this incredible communication network that scientists call the gut-brain axis. And yeah, it is literally a two-way street. Information is constantly zipping back and forth. Your brain sends signals down to your gut, sure. But, and this is the really mind-blowing part, the trillions of microbes in your gut are also sending signals back up to your brain. They're pumping out all sorts of chemicals that can directly influence how you think and feel. This isn't some fringe idea, by the way. This connection is powerful and very, very real. And that brings us right to the heart of this whole thing. It all centers around one patient and her journey through two very different experiences with two sacred plant medicines. So, who are we talking about? The study focuses on a 35-year-old woman who was already using psychedelics to help with her depression. She was looking for ways to deal with grief, with burnout, and just to connect better with her life. And it's super important to note, this was not some sterile clinical trial. This was researchers observing her on her own personal journey. Now, the two medicines she worked with are fascinating. On one hand, you've got ayahuasca. It's this Amazonian brew, often called the grandmother medicine, and its active compound is DMT. On the other hand, you have Huachuma from the Andean San Pedro cactus. This one's known as the grandfather, and its psychoactive ingredient is mescaline. So we've got totally different chemicals, and as you're about to hear, totally different experiences. And you can really feel that difference in her own words. Just listen to how she talks about ayahuasca. She calls it grandmother medicine, this challenging but wise presence. She says it's like a vine that gets to know you, shows you things, and sometimes, it just slams you with the hard truths you need to hear. But then you have the Huachuma experience, and it was a whole different vibe. Totally different. She said it was way less visual and much more about this deep inner feeling. A sort of stoic, masculine energy where she had to be the one asking the questions. It wasn't about being shown things, but about finding this inner sense of knowing and trust. Okay, so we have these two powerful but totally distinct personal experiences. But what about the hard data? What did the numbers say? This, my friends, is where things get really interesting. So let's look at her depression scores using a standard medical scale. Before the ayahuasca ceremony, she scored an 18. That's in the moderate depression range. And after, it plummeted to a 6. That's officially considered remission. Now look at Huachuma. She started at a 12, which is mild depression, and dropped all the way down to a 2. I mean, wow. In both cases, that is a massive, life-changing improvement. And it wasn't just about getting rid of the bad stuff, They also measured something called connectedness, basically how connected you feel to yourself, to other people, to the world around you. After ayahuasca, her score just exploded, jumping from 62% to over 95%. And she had a huge leap with Huachuma too. That's not just a number, that's a fundamental shift in how you experience life. Okay, so the mental health results are pretty undeniable, right? But that wasn't the whole story the researchers were after. The big question was, could you actually see these changes reflected somewhere in her body? Specifically, what was happening in her gut? And here it is. the central idea of this whole explainer, connecting what's happening in the mind to what's happening with the microbes. Okay, now this table might look a little complicated, but the takeaway is actually super simple. The specific types of bacteria that changed were different after each ceremony, but the overall trend was exactly the same. For both ayahuasca and huachuma, the bad guys, the bacteria linked to inflammation, went down, and the good guys, the ones that produce anti-inflammatory stuff, went up. It's like her entire gut ecosystem got a positive upgrade. So if there's one thing to remember from all of this sciencey stuff, it's this. Even though the medicines were different and the trips were different, they both did the same thing to her gut. They pushed it away from an inflammatory state and towards a healthier, more balanced one. So this allows the researchers to put forward a really cool hypothesis for how this healing might actually work. Step 1, the patient has the psychedelic experience. Step 2, that experience somehow shifts the gut microbiome. Step 3, this new microbiome reduces inflammation in the body. And step 4, that message of less inflammation travels up the gut-brain superhighway, leading to fewer depressive symptoms. It's a brand new way of thinking about how this all works. Now, before we get too carried away, we have to be good scientists here. It's absolutely crucial to talk about the limitations of a study like this. First and foremost, we gotta remember, this is a case study. We're talking about one person. This is not definitive proof of anything. What it is a fascinating clue, a signpost for future research. Plus, these weren't controlled lab settings. They were traditional ceremonies with a lot of variables. And let's be honest, microbiome science itself is still a super new field. So think of this as the very first chapter, not the end of the book. And that really brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? This one little study opens up a massive door. It hints at a future where treating our minds might involve treating our microbes. A future where we realize that the ancient wisdom in these plants works through pathways we're just now discovering with modern science. It really, truly gives a whole new meaning to the phrase gut feeling.